Right. Good evening from the United Kingdom, everybody, and good morning to those in the US, and welcome to everybody from around the world. This is a really strange experience for me and indeed from Harrison, but I really look forward to it. Hopefully everyone can see the slides, so we'll dive straight in to the intro. So I'm Flight Lieutenant Luke O'Brien. I'm a Royal Air Force officer. I'm joined virtually by Harrison, who's an apprentice within my team in the Ministry of Defence Enterprise Security Operations Centre. So the talk is in three parts. Start off giving the big picture and the context, sharing some information on apprenticeships in the UK, drilling down into the UK Ministry of Defence's cybersecurity sort of posture. I'm going to talk about the Joint Security Operations Centre, of which I'm in command. Then I'm going to hand over to Harrison for the interesting bit of the presentation, the relevant lived experience from him and how he's found the past 6 months as a junior analyst within the SOC. Then after his bit, meat of the presentation, hand back over to me to draw together those conclusions and round it out and head for some questions. So yeah, as Kellen says, stick those in the Discord and we will get to them towards the end of the brief. So first part, my perspective on things. So a bit about me. I'm a Royal Air Force officer. I'm an engineer with background in communications and electronics. I've worked with fighter aircraft and worked with transport, both short haul and strategic transport aircraft around the world, the UK and indeed the Middle East. So firstly, I'm just going to talk about apprenticeships. So this is very much a UK perspective. So if we use any sort of UK specific terminology, please just call us out on it. We'll try and be careful on that one. So an apprenticeship is a learn while you earn type bit of employment, and traditionally it's been focused on the sort of manual labour, the trades, but in recent years, within the UK especially, that has branched out to basically every sector of employment in the country, not just the public sector, the private sector, business, industry, IT, construction, basically everything you can think of, and it's at all different levels. So not just the 18-year-old young people starting their employment. You can take on a postgraduate master's degree apprenticeship through a whole host of different routes. Within the UK, the Ministry of Defence is actually the largest single provider. We have about 20,000 apprentices at any one time, and the bulk of that is the junior enlisted personnel joining the military. Basically, every single one of those people joining will do an apprenticeship of one sort whilst they learn their trade. But the civil service, which is what we're going to talk about today, is also an increasing provider of those sorts of apprenticeships across the whole gamut of specialisations. But specifically, cybersecurity apprenticeships have been running for about 5 years, and there's been about 20 graduates, but that number is increasing every year. It's a 2-year programme, but I won't say too much and steal Harrison sandwiches. But it's a growing enterprise within the MOD. And within my team, Security Operations Centre, we've had about 4 or 5 apprentices working in the team, all of whom have gone off to greater and better things, whether that's within the civil service or elsewhere in the private sector. Again, staying in cybersecurity. So it's a real testament for the importance of that. So I've got some stats. It's always good to have statistics in a presentation like this. From the British Computer Society, talking about IT apprenticeships specifically. Hugely popular across the UK for companies that are introducing them. 85% of companies say it increases the skills within their organisation. 2/3 said that it's improved retention of their staff. And 65% of apprentices stay on for longer than their minimum term service for most companies, which I think is really good. For me, it addresses some of the major problems that we have in the InfoSec community. Recruitment into the organisation, well, that's the whole purpose of this whole conference. It's talking about how to get people into cybersecurity. Retaining those skills, giving people something to develop themselves forward, giving them a target to reach for, that's really key. We talk about a skills gap all the time. This is an opportunity for us to grow our own skills internally. So I'm a massive advocate of the whole process and of the whole principle of the thing. So we'll talk a little bit more about the JSOC, the Joint Security Operations Centre. It's part of the Global Operations Security and Control Centre, or GOSC, based in MOD Corsham in Wiltshire. For those who are not British European, that's in the west of England. So there's a nice picture there from the PR department. So it's the nerve centre for communications and IT for the UK Ministry of Defence. Everything is operated and defended out of that building. So a big network operations centre linked in with our security operations centre. We are a global enterprise, as you can imagine, 300,000 users worldwide. And we cover 3 distinct security tiers. Those who've worked government are familiar with those, so the unclassified, normal, day-to-day working. We have a secret system that we use to do lots of mission planning and operational communications. And then at the most sensitive tier, we've got systems more sensitive than that that help us work with our international partners and intelligence agencies. So the SOC maintains 24/7, 365 continuous monitoring and incident response capabilities. And with an enterprise of that sort of size and scale, deployed across the world from major headquarters and hubs in the UK to overseas, all the way down to a couple of people on a training mission in Africa. So we cover the whole spread of the cybersecurity threat picture, from your script kiddies to your cyber scammers. COVID related at the moment is a massive one, all the way up to advanced persistent threats from nation states. I've been lucky enough to be unlucky enough to have been involved in incidents and operations regarding the whole spread of those sorts of threat actors. As you can imagine, with a huge user base and a huge spread around the world, we have dozens of live incidents and operations ongoing at any one time. So what does the team look like? We're a tier 1 to 3 organisation, tier 1 being more entry level, with tier 3 being the most skilled and most advanced, most well-trained individuals. So it's broken down into the 4 teams you can see there. Defensive monitoring, which is the 24/7 element, that covers off the day-to-day SIM activity, taking tickets, triaging them up to a certain level, and then they will hand that off to the incident response, incident management teams. So that team is where we've got quite a lot of the diversity there. That's 50% civilian and 50% military. So the civil servants bring to us a lot of expertise. They have that longer term viewpoint. They're not being moved around. I'm not sure how familiar people are with the armed forces, but we tend to post people on a fairly regular basis to different jobs. So we can build expertise within that civil service cadre and train them up and get them to the top tiers. So what they'll normally do is they'll take a ticket, an incident will come in, flagged to us by a SIM. They'll do the initial work on that, pulling PCAPs, analysing the traffic, working out what's going on, and then handing that over. So they'll move that on. They work a shift basis, so they'll do maybe a dozen of those a day, so that initial work, and hand it over to the specialised teams to make sure that that 24/7 operation is maintained. Incident response team, incident management team, they carry out that longer term remediation of those incidents. For those who've worked in sort of major bureaucracies or major corporations, it takes a long time to get things through. We've got a lot of service providers contracted out, various different companies providing different aspects of our network. So we have to work between those to get to the bottom of those incidents. Then as we get sort of up to the sort of tier 2 and tier 3 sides of the house, the threat detection team, they are threat hunters. They are the ones who are carrying out that deep log analysis, looking for those malicious actors that may have got around our SIM and around our present detection capabilities. That's something that we're maturing. We've been working on that for maybe 2 or 3 years. Have we found anything yet? Well, we've found a lot of weird stuff, but we've not found any sort of smoking guns just yet. But I think that's similar with a lot of major companies that are running threat hunting teams. We also have threat analysis. So they are my team, my go-to individuals for all things related to malware. So the reverse engineering, imagine an organization of 300,000. We get a whole host of spam and phishing coming in. So they can analyze things, reverse engineering, sandboxing, and even trialing it out against our own systems, which is a really good bit of practice. So that's 4 teams. Harrison's apprenticeship is 2 years. So doing the quick maths, that's 6 months per team. And we're just coming up to the end of Harrison's first 6 months, having joined us in October 2019. And I'll hand over to him there to talk about his experience within the SOC. Thanks.
Right. So, hi everyone. I'm Harrison, and I'm the cybersecurity apprentice. So, as Luke just said, I've been an apprentice for about 6 months now, and this is my experience so far. So, can I get the next slide, please, Luke? Thank you. So, decision to become an apprentice versus university. So, I'll go back to my early years of secondary school. I found out about apprenticeships and what they can offer me, and that in exchange to going to university, getting a degree, and then going into the industry. Then I've always been quite fond of doing cybersecurity, and I deemed that I made the discovery that doing an apprenticeship was far better for me to get into the cyber field than going to university and getting a degree. People have gone to university and got a degree and go into cyber, but I feel like the experience is more what I need to make myself a better analyst and to get into the industry. And so about this apprenticeship specifically, I found it when I was in my last year of college, which is a senior for you Americans. I applied to it and I managed to get it, and I've not looked back since. I've really enjoyed it. So motivations, I've always really been motivated to get a good job. I feel like apprenticeships was for me the easiest way and most effective way to get into the cyber field. I could have gone to university, but I'm glad I didn't, in a way, because I've got this so far 6 months of experience, but will soon to become 2 years of experience that other people my age and with my level, that people won't have the same experience as me. So the application process was interesting to say the least, very in depth. It took quite a while. It took about 6 to 8 months for it to all go through, because you need to be security cleared, and the interview was very in depth, quite a long interview. But I kind of expected this, as it is the Ministry of Defence, I expected it to be really in depth, but it was surprising. It was kind of quite surreal when I did it. And so starting out, joining the team was very, very interesting. For a couple of reasons. One of these was I've never worked a desk job. I've never been in big organizations. I've never seen how they operate in an office scene. And so it was a difficult change, but I'm over now. But sometimes it was very hectic. It was very fast paced. But I've learned to kind of deal with the stress and understand what's happening, how to resolve it, and not get bogged down by it. So I found that good. And also a majority of the GOSC is military or former military, so that's also a difficult step into joining. I had to know, well, when I started I didn't know very much, but I had to learn the aspects of working with military and the hierarchy and how everything kind of works. So that was somewhat difficult, but I'm over that now. So can I get the next slide, please, Luke? Thank you. So formal versus on the job. So as Luke mentioned, it's an 80-20 split in the learning, so 80% on the job and 20% learning. So there's an external education provider called QA, and they deal with all the learning side of the apprenticeship. So they do off-site courses in subjects like security fundamentals, networking, computer policies, ethical hacking, penetration testing, things like that. And those courses are interesting, but they do offer skills that correlate into the office. So it's good that they've implemented things like that into the apprenticeship, because it would be very difficult if 100% of the work was just on the job. You wouldn't learn as much as the split that it has. And the 80-20 split equates to 1 day a week or 1 week a month of learning. So working with the team, so my team's a 24-hour shift, and so they do 2 days and 2 nights. So starting off, this was quite difficult because, as you can imagine, me, 18-year-old apprentice coming in, I see the shift, they're there for 2 days, and then I go in the next day and there's a brand new group of people doing the same job, but I have to introduce myself, I have to become friends with everyone, and so that was difficult, and that lasted for about 2 or 3 weeks until I met everyone and got comfortable with it. And then after that, it worked really well. Luckily, everyone's very friendly, so it didn't really become much of an issue. And the military environment, so adapting to the military environment was very difficult to start off with. I don't think I've even ever met anyone that's in the military until I started this job, and so that was a really big a punch in the face. So I didn't have, as I said earlier, didn't have very much military knowledge. I've never been in the military. So to start off with, Luke would set me tasks on learning the ranks, and the ranks between different services and the level of hierarchy, how that all fits together and how everything operates. So but that was really useful to start with. But nowadays I can see the ranks. I know the hierarchy. I know everyone's place in the organization. And so I don't need to do as much research. I'm more knowledgeable. Some different skill sets, hard and soft. So the soft skills that I learned were, I'm not really sure about. I think I'm going to skip that question actually. The next steps. So I want to go into the SOC. I would like to stay within the SOC. I don't think that leaving the MOD would be something that I'd be interested in, because I really enjoy my team and the environment I work in. I don't know if it would be the same in more of the private sector. And maybe further down the line, I'd like to go into something like doing a degree or doing SANS courses or something along those lines. That would really suit me. But staying in the job is really what I want to do. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Luke.
All right, thanks, Harrison. So we'll just draw together some conclusions for the last 5 minutes or so before we head into some questions. So for me, and my perspective, I think an apprenticeship is a fantastic way to start any career, but especially with cybersecurity. I went to university. The Air Force sponsored me, but I didn't get a free ride by any stretch of the imagination. But looking at the head start that you can get, in terms of starting your career, maybe 3 or 4 years earlier, and getting that technical background and getting that experience is absolutely fantastic. It's really a great opportunity. And if I could go back, I might give my younger self a bit of advice and steer me potentially that way. The balance of blended learning, I think, is really useful. There's a lot of people around the world, it's not just a UK thing, who potentially struggle in school because they don't see the application of what they're learning. Sitting learning a calculus lesson, for example, it's difficult for a lot of people to see how that is contextualized. I have a master's degree in engineering now, so sadly I'm all too familiar with how those principles are applied, but it can be a bit abstract. Whereas, as Harrison quite rightly said, learning on the job and then contextualizing that with that sort of foundational knowledge and then applying that the very next day or the very next week is hugely relevant, and certainly helps you build those skills up very, very quickly. It's like a muscle. You have to use it to get better at it. Yeah, I think the head start is really, really beneficial. No student debt, as we still have in the UK. Student loans, quite a big burden to take on, and that 3 or 4 years of work experience, of life experience, as Harrison said. Never worked an office job, never worked in a big organization, never worked with such a range of people before, never even met someone from the military. That experience is hugely, hugely valuable, and that's a sort of soft skill that people are often looking for. Myself as a manager, I'm not just looking for certs, as long as you're armed. I'm looking for communication, I'm looking for teamwork, I'm looking for presenting skills, and those are the sort of soft skills that we really want to emphasize as well, because you could be the best analyst in the world, but if you can't communicate and work with the rest of your team, then you're not much use to an organization if you are just that sort of rock star egocentric individual. So these apprenticeships give you that balance of everything. This is why I push Harrison to do these presentations, smaller talks to the members of the team, and then being thrown into an example of something like this, massive benefit for him. I think that comes down to quality versus quantity of experience. So he's working in a main government department, defending a huge enterprise by some metrics with the largest network in Europe, certainly one of the world's biggest Office 365 shops. But national level operations are such a unique experience. So the quality of that experience, even in only a 6-month period up till now, or a 2-year apprenticeship, is absolutely fantastic. And I think we sometimes in the industry, by putting maybe 5 years experience and 10 different certifications on a resume or a job application, puts up that barrier. Whereas an apprenticeship, you can really build up that experience in quite a short time and have a good amount of credibility into any sort of environment and any sort of role. So I think that now brings us nicely to about the 20-minute slot, ready for 10 minutes or so of questions from our Discord channel and from wherever they may be coming in from. So Kellen, I suppose over to you. We're happy to take anything really.
Yeah, so there was some questions about if this is specific to where you all are located. That's correct, right?
Yeah, so it's apprenticeships are a UK thing. I'm not sure how they work around the world, but the Ministry of Defence takes loads of different apprenticeships. There's over 20 different ones that you can do, but the cybersecurity ones are mostly in our part of the country in the southwest.
Gotcha. Let's see here. So we have a question that's, how do you get an apprenticeship opportunity? So if you could answer from your perspective, and then I could probably talk about it here from the US perspective as well, just so we cover both sides.
Yeah, I suppose, Harrison, is that one that you can potentially cover off?
Yeah. So for me, so the question is getting an apprenticeship opportunity, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot of websites that help. They list all the available apprenticeship. Well, in the UK, they list all the available apprenticeships, so you can filter by the job you want to go into, the field, sometimes even location, like from where you are to going out. So for me, I went on the civil service jobs website, and that's where all the apprenticeships were listed. And so I just found one that suited something that I wanted to go into, and then applied that way. So that was my entrance into the apprenticeship.
Yeah, and basically the same thing here in the US. There's tons of job boards. There's usjobs.gov, I believe, for anybody that's in the US, and there's often apprenticeships and internships for similar types of roles that have been talked about here. We did get a really interesting question for Harrison. What's the most interesting thing you've learned these few months in the SOC?
I'm not really sure. It's not more. The hard skills that I've learned aren't really the interesting aspect. It's just more the how fast-paced it is and being inside like an office environment. As I said, I've never been in that, so that to me that was the most intriguing, because you see these office scenes on television, and then to actually work inside of one, that to me was the most interesting part.
Definitely, yeah. Transitioning to office life can be different. Luke, what about you? What's something interesting that you've seen or learned while being in this role?
So I've been in this job for 2.5 years. Previous to that, IT manager. I've done some cyber stuff with my American cousins. So seeing how difficult blue team role is just incredible. The speed that you have to innovate and you have to develop, and for every time that you think you've found a way to mitigate some sort of vulnerability or threat, a new one comes along. I think the most interesting thing about this particular job is that it's what we do day to day is directly connected to what is happening on the rolling 24-hour news. So I started in the job maybe 6 months after WannaCry had happened and hit the UK NHS really quite badly. There was an attack in Salisbury on a Russian dissident by the Russian government, and that was a hugely sensitive time. And my team were in the midst of that, because as we know, cyber warfare is a big business. Through a whole host of other international countries experienced players of that. I'm trying to be careful with my words. So that was a really interesting time, certainly. And that was 2018. So maybe after I was maybe 6-7 months into the job too. So yeah, that probably was the most interesting time for me over the past 2.5 years.
Yeah, definitely. I like your point about what you guys do is directly tied to what's happening in the world. I do threat hunting, and it very much is like, what's in the news, what's happening, what are we looking at today? The fast-paced environment is so real. You have to be up on your stuff. Oh, this is a really good question. I like this. What's the difference between blue team and red team?
my perspective, sometimes it can be good guys versus bad guys.
Right.
But of course, we know that the red team can work for the blue team. And it's an interesting one. We don't really do, within my part of the organisation, we don't do like penetration testing and that sort of stuff. We do have people in the military that do that role, but they're definitely not the enemy, and they're definitely good to find holes in your defences that you might think are pretty solid. But it's really useful. Of course, we do rely on those people, and I think the perception amongst people who are not part of this InfoSec community is that the red teamers are the ones who can whip out a laptop and hack anything within 30 seconds. But I think we all are learning that that's not quite true. So I think potentially the blue team side, it can be seen as less sexy and fascinating and interesting, but it's certainly the one that is most widely used. There's not a government department, a main sort of business or corporation that doesn't need a blue team. Certainly is my view on the perspective.